supposed to sit here? What? Yeah, I got How are you? Oh, you got nice ties on. I gotta step up my game here. Sure, yeah. I don't know what printer is. There's been a lot of. I'll tell you what, I'll just give you a lot of. You give me a whole thing. No. I'll give you the It's like one picture.
No, we got it.
Hi, how are you? I saw him back there. Yeah, it's clear. They are doing a good job. Change my life. Yeah, I put in a work request. Burned out like all 4 years. And Glenn said it was a work from home. But I hated everyone. So today, Rob and I don't want to do like fluorescent, so I do soft light. So that's when I'm really poor. Yeah, because I went up and bought them at 13 bucks. 26 bucks. I bought them. I put it in my house. Oh, yeah, how are you?
So are you peddling the Girl Scout cookies?
Did you order some? I gotta give Chuck his. They're in my living room floor in a box.
Is there still some available?
I could sell you Chuck's.
You can sell me mine for double dollar.
Yeah.
I want 2 boxes.
I didn't get any.
You know, if I work for Office, I would sell his boxes.
And you get your
Yeah. Uh-oh, that's all I need. No caffeine. How'd it go?
How are you?
I'm good. How about you?
Good. Perch. I love it.
Good.
Yeah.
Go, man, go. Killing me. Yeah.
Hey, how's it going?
You back?
Yes.
I'm standing in front of
More
the
officially.
I didn't realize I was standing right in front of the camera. What do you mean more officially? More prepared, you mean?
Yeah. Hopefully not get up and down that much.
I can go say that.
Where's the first?
coming in right now.
Okay. How do you turn this on? All right, I guess it's on. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Carol Benton. I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of Geauga. Welcome to our second in a series of 3 property tax education sessions. These free community events are sponsored by the Geauga County Library, the Geauga County Auditor's Office, and the League of Women Voters of Geauga. If you're able, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our goal at the League has always been and always will be to educate voters with facts so they can make their own decisions at the ballot box. Potential changes to property taxes in Ohio is a crucial topic. We're unwavering in our commitment to making sure that residents better understand property taxes, what these taxes currently fund, and how potential changes, whether abolishment or other reforms, could affect local services, school funding, and their overall cost of living. In selecting tonight's panel, we invited experienced elected officials who currently serve our county, schools, and townships, and who have direct responsibility for public budgets. These leaders manage complex financial decisions and regularly respond to residents' questions about property taxes. They bring both technical expertise and practical experience, and they understand firsthand how property tax policies affect services, budgets, and the community as a whole. Joining us on tonight's panel are 4 elected officials in Geauga County representing various government entities. First, Karen Blankenship, the president of the Chardon Board of Education. Carolyn Brakey is County Commissioner, Geauga County Commissioner, and a member of PART, which is the Property Tax Abolishment Response Task Force. Todd Ray is the Munson Township Fiscal Officer, and Greg Trofe is a Newberry Township trustee. Moderating our discussion this evening is Marla Zwingy, our first vice president of the League. To allow time for as many questions as possible this evening, panelists' responses will be timed. Before we begin, I have a few administrative items to review. When you checked in this evening, the League's candidate forum and educational event policy was made available. This policy explains how we collect questions from attendees and outlines our expectations for respectful participation so that we can make the best use of our time this evening with our panelists. Panelists will take questions at the end of the discussion. Index cards and pencils were in your chairs when you took your seats tonight. If you have a question, write it legibly on your card and just raise up your card. One of our question runners will pick it up. Our trained question screeners will review the questions to ensure that all questions are first relevant. Is the question pertinent to the topic of conversation and our discussion? Clearly stated, is the question presented in clear, unambiguous language that is easily understood? Concise, does the question only include necessary and important details? Focused, is the focus on one specific question? Multiple part questions are less likely to be asked. And lastly, informative, is the question likely to elicit responses that help voters make informed choices? After the review, the event moderator has final discretion over which questions will be asked. I would also like to point out that handouts prepared by the Auditor's Office are available on the table outside. These materials provide detailed information on property tax funding for a number of Geauga County government entities. I encourage you to take copies before you leave. I also want to announce that the Axe Ohio Tax Group, who is supporting the abolishment of property taxes in Ohio, is working with the Geauga County Library to hold an educational event. The date is still to be determined. Lastly, as a reminder, the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization. We do not support nor oppose candidates or political parties. I'll now turn things over to Chuck Walder, Geauga County Auditor, who will start the session off with a brief overview of property tax basics.
Thank you, everybody, and thanks for coming out today. I appreciate your time. They informed you that there would be some intelligent people speaking tonight. That person couldn't come, so I'm here in their stead. What I'd like to do is first start out with some building blocks so that we all get on the same page. The slide that you're looking at in front of you, on the right-hand side of that slide is the makeup of your tax bill. There are three primary components to your taxes. At the bottom in blue, you'll see there's an unvoted component in your tax bill called inside millage. That inside millage is capped by law at 10 mills. A mill is 1/1000th of your value, of the assessed value. That particular inside millage is what goes by Constitution of Ohio to fund governments. So 45% of that amount goes to your school, whatever school district you're in. 30% of that inside millage goes to the community in which you live, whether that's a township, a village, or a city. And then 25% of it goes to the county. So those components that you're taxed are not voted by you. Towards the left of that slide, next to the blue box, you will see that that particular number moves proportionately with valuation of your property. So as your property values go up, if they go up 10%, theoretically the inside millage goes up 10%. Now, I want to give you a little caveat. I have next to that particular box, House Bill 335. That's a new law that's been passed recently. It is going to affect this year. That will limit that growth of inside millage to inflation on an annual basis. So in the past, it rode directly with your value change. Going forward, it will be capped at inflation on a given year. The next component of your tax are the taxes you vote for. And those are levies for schools, libraries, roads, fire, anything that you are asked to cast your vote for or against, and those make up a considerable portion of your tax bill. If you notice on the left side next to that orange box, it indicates, and this is a true statement, those values do not change with valuation. However, if you have two homes next to each other, both equal to $100,000, let's say, and during a revaluation, one house goes down in value and the other house goes up in value, there is a shifting of tax from one to the other. That's called tax equalization. So during a reval, even though that component doesn't grow, it does shift, and that happens every time there's a reval. House Bill 96 is affecting that component. That passed late last year. House Bill 96 removed the ability of anybody to put a replacement levy on the ballot. A replacement levy is considered an old levy that is being refreshed to today's money. That's no longer lawful. The third and final component that may affect you but may not affect you, depending on where you live, is an unvoted component called the 20 mil floor. In Geauga, we have two schools that were at the 20 mil floor. That was West Geauga. If you lived in the West Geauga community, you would experience this change to the inside, to the 20 mil floor component, or if you were in the Berkshire school zone. So that is changing. It changes every time there's a new valuation and reset of the values. Currently, West G is no longer at the floor. However, Cardinal is very close to the floor. Those values do change. That amount does change with valuation. However, there are two new House bills that are enacted that are going to affect that change. And that is House Bill 129 and House Bill 186. Those take effect this year. One of them offers into the equation, which were not previously included, whether there's an emergency or a substitute or an incremental levy. They were never counted in the floor adjustment. They're now counted. And the second bill, House Bill 186, also caps the growth of the 20 mil floor to inflation. So those are important things to consider. I think the people that I've talked to in the community are most upset about the unvoted component of their taxes. I think rightfully so. And so we're going to focus a little bit on what magnitude is that in your tax. So if we can go to the next slide, please. This particular slide, I think, is interesting and very pertinent to all of us. That slide tells you what Geauga County experiences. And I know after the first session we had, there was a little bit of confusion. Some people left after the event and said, so this whole initiative is only relevant to Geauga. That's not true. So if the taxes are abolished in the state by vote, it's everywhere in the state. The other thing that I think we have to remember is it doesn't just count residential property. All property would be exempt. So, for example, this was the year after the sexennial, we collected and distributed in the auditor's office almost $250 million of property tax. Now, I don't know about you, but I was surprised at how big that number was. I mean, I know my people work hard. I didn't realize they were moving that much money, but they do. 82% of that money is the component comes from the res or ag, so people that have farms and people that live in their homes. 11%, a little bit more than 11% comes from commercial and industrial, and that's indicative because Geauga is typically not a high industrial county compared to some other counties. And then the last segment, which a lot of us don't even worry about anymore, is 6.5% comes from public utilities. So those components, I think, are important to recognize. We would not just eliminate property tax for the 82% window that is paying tax that you and I are most familiar with because we own homes, but all of the other segments of taxation would also disappear. So let's look at how that compiles the group of money that we collect and distribute. The voted component of what our tax bills are made up of constitutes nearly 70% of our tax bill. So you have direct and regular control over whether or not you want that tax to occur. That is equal to $172 million a year in Geauga County. There are two components of it that are relevant. One is any old money, that's pre-2013 money that is on the tax rolls, that gets some credits from the state called rollback, and your component of that is only 87.5%. Any new money after 2013, is 100% burdened to the taxpayer. The next biggest component is this inside millage, which is unvoted. That component represents 18% of your tax bill, $45.5 million of your tax, and you pay 87.5% of that. The other 12.5% comes from the state in the form of rollback again. So the state considers inside millage old money because it was in the Constitution prior to 2013. The third largest component is the state rollback component. Almost 10% of your money is coming from the state. So while I understand and I personally believe we have to have tax reform, my concern is abolishing it gives the folks in Columbus a 10% pay raise. I have a problem with that. The very tiny portion that I want to point out is left over in this particular pie chart, and that's the unvoted component called the 20 mil floor. In Geauga, compared to many other counties, we have less exposure to this particular part. Only 2.4% of it, roughly $6 million, comes from those components, and it only involves the two school districts that I talked about earlier. So I would like to, before I turn this over to the prosecutor, I'd like to point out how have we told our government agencies whether or not we wish to have a tax put upon our property. So this next slide, I think, speaks for itself, but we're going to go through it a little bit. I did the last 2 years of levies that were put on the ballot and what kind of performance they yielded. So going back to November 5th of 2024, the election had 23 ballot issues asking for money. So that money may have been a renewal, it may have been a replacement because they were legal then, or it may have been an additional levy. Of those 23, 21 passed. That's a 91% pass rate. The only two that failed were two school levies. One was in Geauga and one was just north of Geauga that has a Geauga component. Then in May of last year, at the election, there were two ballot issues for new money. 100% of those passed. And then in November of last year, there were 16 ballot initiatives, all asking for money. 15 of the 16 passed. That's a 94% passage rate. And one of them that failed was a school levy. I think we all know that was West G. That was a combining of two levies into one. It counted as one. But that was the only levy that failed in that period. So I think my takeaway from this information is the Geauga residents have been very generous. They have overwhelmingly approved levies that were brought to them that they vetted and believed to be valuable and directly what they wanted to do. And my worry is we're not just getting rid of levies we didn't want, like inside millage and the 20 mil floor. We'd get rid of everything, including the ones we voted for. So we just need to know that going into this. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Jim Flace to talk a little bit about the petition to abolish property tax.
Thank you, Chuck. Chuck, before he got up here, said he was going to talk for 8 minutes and went over that a little bit. So I'm going to, yeah, a little bit. I'll be very brief. Thank you for everyone and thank you to the league. Chuck just wanted me to talk again about the proposed constitutional amendment. So this is the text up there. Much different than a lot of other constitutional amendments. The language is very simple, and I do think that is a good thing from the standpoint of it's straightforward, but there is a misconception that I've been running into, and Chuck touched on. So this abolishes all real property taxes, and no taxes will be imposed on real property, and no other provision of the Constitution shall impose taxes on real property, because some of our property taxes are imposed by the state constitution, and our state constitution makes other funding guarantees, like guaranteeing education for all of the kids in the state. That's actually in our state constitution. So this would eliminate all real property taxes, and any constitutional provision that imposes property taxes would be eliminated. One of the big misconceptions I'm running into is, well, this is just giving property tax relief to seniors or owner-occupied homes. No, this is all property taxes. So no more public utility taxes, no more commercial property taxes, no more apartment building property taxes. All property taxes are eliminated. And one of the issues that we've discussed, and when I put on my prosecutor hat, for example, Home Depot. Home Depot would not pay any more property taxes. And they are a big stress on our county resources. Bainbridge Police spend a lot of time down there. I spend a lot of time on Home Depot cases prosecuting them. And most of it are from folks coming from outside of the county and victimizing our businesses. So again, we get sales tax from that, but only 1% of your sales tax comes back to the county. So all those property taxes would go away, and those local services, the ambulance runs, you'd be surprised how many times the ambulance goes to Walmart or the shopping centers. All of those real estate taxes would be gone that support those local services. So that's a big issue. And I did, after our last session, we were kicking this around. Well, maybe our prices will come down. So I did a little experiment. I went on the Home Depot website. I pulled up a Samsung French door refrigerator. And I did it from the Chardon Home Depot, and it was $2,000, $1,099.99. So $2,000 for the refrigerator. And then I pulled up, the only zip code I know in California is Beverly Hills, because that'll date me a little bit. So I put in that zip code and pulled up the Home Depot in California, which we would probably all agree is the terrible tax environment, right? The refrigerator is the same price. So your costs aren't going to come down if we stop imposing these taxes, especially on the big box stores. And that's definitely a concern. Next slide, I just have one more. Then briefly, this is not on the ballot yet. So what needs to happen for this to get on the ballot? And there's always a lot of confusion about that. By July 1st, they would need to submit, the group that's proposing this, 413,487 valid signatures. Now there's a cure period and there's some other things that you don't have to worry about, but that is the number of signatures they would need to submit, valid registered voters. And then there are some other requirements. They have to be from at least half of the counties, and in each of those 44 counties, there has to be at least 5% of the vote that went for the last gubernatorial election. So there are some hurdles. Many of our constitutional amendment procedures that have gone on, and successful ones have utilized, paid signature takers, companies that specialize in this. Grassroots ones are difficult. So as of now, it's not on the ballot, but that July 1st date is what we'd be looking at to see, is this going to go before the voters? Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Marla Zwingy. I'm the first vice president of the League of Women Voters, and I'll be your moderator tonight. Before we begin, I would like to give a shout out to my late grandfather, Edward Picorni, on what would have been his 118th birthday today. Grandpa Ed was a Geauga County resident and voted in every single election he was eligible for up until his death in 2004. I found an article that mentioned an award he received for his dedication to voting in Geauga, and he was quoted as grabbing the microphone and saying, "If you don't vote, you should keep your mouth shut. To which Secretary of State Bob Taft then said, who was giving him the award, that was better than any 45-minute speech. So, happy birthday, Grandpa Ed. All right, can everyone hear me okay? Yes? Great. Okay, we are going to start with Ms. Blankenship, President of Chardon Schools, with our first question this evening. Ms. Blankenship, please list all the funding sources Chardon Schools currently receives funds from, and what percentage of your total funds each source represents. You'll have 90 seconds.
Okay, hold on a minute. I thought we were doing it different. So, we have a number of state and federal mandates that we have to follow. The majority of our property tax revenue goes into the general fund, which is broken down to 64.3% for classroom instruction, 13.4% buildings and central clerical administration, 9.14% transportation, 7.93% building operations, 5.18% athletics and discretionary spending. Permanent improvement funds are strictly restricted by law. They can only be spent on capital improvements or assets that have a lifespan of 5 years or longer, meaning we cannot use them for daily operation expenses like salaries.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Trofe, we'll go to you, Newberry Township trustee. Please describe the services provided to property taxpayers in Newberry Township, and if these services are required to be provided under Ohio law.
We provide fire and rescue, that is mandated, health and welfare of the community, and it's funded 97% by property taxes. Road maintenance is also mandatory, and that's about 70% funded by property taxes. There's outside gas tax, license tax that also go towards that. Cemeteries. We have very reasonable fees for our cemeteries. It's mandated that we run cemeteries for the township. It's funded 75% by property taxes. Our general fund, just so you know, is about 50% property taxes. We also provide zoning, which some you're not mandated to provide zoning, but we do. Parks. We have different things in the community, cleanup days and stuff like that, and those all come out of property taxes.
Thank you. Mr. Ray, Munson Fiscal Officer, could you please tell the audience the split of property tax funds Munson Township receives between private homeowners and commercial property owners?
Yes, in Munson, approximately 88% of our property tax revenue comes from residential property owners, and the other 12% is commercial and a small amount of public utilities.
Okay. Commissioner Brakey, we'll go to you next. So based on your experience as a local official, how do you think the Ohio property tax system could be improved or reformed?
Well, first of all, let me just say that I am a member of a board, but I am only representing myself and not the full board. So that's my legal disclaimer, of course. I would say a lot of I think pending legislation is doing a good job of putting some reins on property taxes, but I think we need a big system overhaul when it comes to taxes in general, not just property taxes, and we can't just look at those in isolation. In a county like Geauga County, we are largely a giver county in terms of our state contribution and our federal contribution to taxes. And that, I mean, we pay more in those taxes than we are able to claw back as a county. And that is redistributed elsewhere in the state or the country, right, through funding formulas, and especially this happens with education funding. And this means our residents, they often feel this burden of taxation, but they don't feel a corresponding amount of services in return. So I do think we need to look at this as a more holistic problem, and I think that starts by letting our taxes stay more locally, preferably in your pocket. But to the extent that you are being taxed, I think that should stay within our county. I also think we need less regulation in the state level and the federal level. A lot of what we are seeing with increased cost over the years is a result of that red tape that we're seeing as a result of federal and state laws that really put a burden onto a local government.
Thank you. Ms. Blankenship, we'll go back to you. Would your school district consider consolidating with other area school districts to reduce administrative costs? This doesn't necessarily involve consolidating schools, just reducing the number of districts.
Well, first of all, we always welcome efficiencies, but merging districts won't solve a massive revenue gap. Administrators' costs make up 5 to 8% of school budgets. Most money goes straight to direct student services. Furthermore, merging union contracts usually increase cost because salaries typically rise to match the highest paying district, wiping out any perceived administrative savings. Finally, in a geographically large county like Geauga, merging creates high operational complexities with transportation and dilutes local community representation. So I guess where I'm going with this, it would take a lot of research before districts could start merging to see what effects it would have with the cost to our current taxpayers.
Thank you. Mr. Ray, we'll go to you. How has the amount of funding Munson Township receives from the state changed over time? And how have these changes impacted property taxes for your residents?
Well, one of the more obvious ones is the elimination of estate taxes, which occurred many years ago, but it had been a very inconsistent but valuable source of revenue to township governments. The state has also provided local government funds to supplement local governments like Munson, and for years they have been the state legislature has been trimming back or weaning townships from the local government funding. And then the last thing I would say, we're aware that the state legislature has also been shifting the property tax burden off of commercial business operations in order to make the state a more attractive environment for business. But because the levied taxes are they're a fixed amount, that means that the residential property owners make up the difference. So it's been a subtle shift, but a very definite shift onto residential property owners.
Okay, and I just want to do a quick follow-up with you on that, so I'll give you an additional 30 seconds. Are the funds you receive for Munson restricted, or is your entity able to spend them on anything they choose?
The only funds that are unrestricted are in those that come to the general fund through the inside millage that Chuck referenced. Any levied funds, voted revenue funds, are restricted to the purpose of the levy, and that's very carefully monitored. We can get in trouble if we try spending money outside of those boundaries. And there are a couple of other revenue sources. Greg mentioned the gasoline tax and the motor vehicle tax, which are revenues that are not voted, but they also are restricted only to road purposes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Trofe, do renters benefit disproportionately from the services funded by property taxes in your jurisdiction since they do not directly pay property taxes?
I would say yes. And for the owners of those properties also benefit. They're not renting those houses out to support Newberry. They're renting those houses out to make money. So if they can keep the property taxes lower and not have the services, they don't need them. Most of them do not live in Newberry. They live outside the community in cities that they're paying taxes to. So yes, I believe renters do not pick up their fair share, nor do the owners.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Brackey, have you explored any shared service type of arrangement or consolidation with neighboring or similar government entities in order to provide more efficient and cost-effective services to your constituents?
So I have not personally, but the board prior to me did. So Geauga Transit partners with Lake Transit. The goal of that partnership was actually not cost savings, but was to increase accessibility for riders and make it more reliable and efficient, and also expand opportunities for grant funding. In those ways, it has been successful since that partnership started. Ridership has been up 16%, and they've been able to apply and obtain workforce transportation grants that they otherwise wouldn't be able to do. In my personal capacity, prior to joining the Board of Commissioners, I was on the Board of Health, and we entered into a cooperative agreement with Lake County. I will say as an aside, I've been to many contentious meetings, and it remains the number one most contentious meeting I've ever been to. And that was about a cooperative agreement where we were basically just sharing the upper level management between counties. And our county maintained its sovereignty, maintained its board, and was really just sharing a health commissioner and some other high-level executives, and saving the county about $500,000 a year. So I think there's an opportunity for these shared services. I do think that there's not always an appetite in the county for such things.
Thank you. Ms. Blankenship, please explain the importance that your entity places in long-term planning and strategy development, and your link with predictable funding.
Well, first of all, long-term planning is essential to running the successful school district. We have to make multi-year commitments to hire great teachers, maintain our buildings, and sustain academic programs. But because the state sets its budget every 2 years, also known as biennium, we face constant volatility. Having stable, predictable local tax funding is what allows us to look ahead and focus on student outcomes rather than just constantly managing financial uncertainty from biennium to biennium.
Thank you. Mr. Ray, if property taxes were to be abolished by a state constitutional amendment, what options does Munson have to replace those lost funds?
The short answer is very few. The revenue sources for township government are set by or established by the state legislature. The only ones that we have, that the Board of Trustees has any input or control on, would be setting the prices for fees for services. And right now, I put out some information about this, but our township cemetery fees and zoning fees are reasonable, and they don't cover the cost of the cemetery operations, maintaining the grounds and that sort of thing. They don't cover the cost of the zoning inspector. The zoning fees don't cover the cost of the zoning inspector and all the related the costs that are associated with operating a functioning zoning environment for residents. So beyond that, we do not have any other means to replace lost revenue from if we lose the property tax revenue.
Thank you. Commissioner Brackey, if property taxes were abolished, how do you think the balance between local control and state and federal control might be affected?
Oh, I don't think it would be good. I think it would likely centralize power at the state level. Property taxes are the primary way that local governments have to fund services and make decisions locally. So to the extent that revenue source would disappear, then local entities would then become more dependent on the state, more dependent on the federal government to make up that funding. And that funding typically comes with strings attached, right? It comes with terms and conditions, and it comes with policy direction. So I think any shift in how local government is funded, that's going to reduce that local fiscal independence, and it's going to increase the role of higher levels of government in shaping our local services and our priorities.
Thank you. Mr. Trofe, would your township consider consolidating with other townships or incorporating into villages or cities if property taxes were abolished?
I don't think we'd have much choice. We will not be able to survive without other sources of funding. And we, as many of you know, our school system has territory transferred with West Jaga 4 or 5 years ago, going on 6. I could see that happening, and that's not a bad thing to consolidate. Maybe even if this issue doesn't make it to the ballot, maybe it's something the township should start considering is sharing services and trying to scale back fire protection, road services. And there's things we should be doing to look to save money, even if we're not forced to, because I don't think this is going to go away if it doesn't make it to the ballot this time. I think it'll come back again and again and again. So I believe the township, in my opinion, the township should get together and at least form centralized services, if not merge larger townships together, or townships not larger together.
Thank you. Okay, are we ready to take questions from the audience for our question screeners? Because I'm ready to ask them.
Let's go.
Thank you to everyone who came out tonight and submitted. We appreciate you. Okay, let's go to Mr. Ray. What is the downside to consolidation of townships?
Well, consolidating townships without some way of replacing revenue, to me, does not seem to be a solution. The downside is you might merge, if you were to theoretically merge 2 townships, if they're each operating at, pick a number, 80% of the revenue that they were used to, it still doesn't leave enough to provide the services that the residents are currently used to.
Okay. Commissioner Brakey, what plans are being made or discussed to fund your budget should property taxes be abolished?
Well, I could talk about what options are on the table. So our first option would be increasing the sales tax. So currently our sales tax is set at 6.75%. By state law, we could increase that all the way to 8%. If we go by up to 7.5% on paper, that would actually replace all of our income, all of our revenue that we would lose from abolishing property tax on a county level. It would not make these folks whole, though. I say on paper because when you increase sales tax, folks also are going to shift their spending behavior. So what we're seeing, a lot of our sales tax comes from those big box stores that are on the edges of the county. And people come from Cuyahoga and they come from Lake County and they come from higher taxation environments and they specifically come to our stores for the lower tax. So that is one option on the table. I personally don't use a lot of government services, frankly. So I think one good option is where it's legally allowed is kind of that pay-to-play model. If you're using a service, charge people the actual cost for what that costs to provide that service. But however, a lot of state law kind of limits your ability of what you can charge. I think the final and a good option, maybe the best option, is just drastically cut services. And that would involve getting rid of anything that is not statutorily required, or at least considering getting rid of any services, any departments that are not required by state or federal law.
Thank you. Mr. Trofe, Commissioner Brakey just mentioned the pay-to-play concept. On the abolishment argument side, what if any, are the plans to raise revenue for necessary services like fire, police, roads?
We don't have any specific, obviously, the easy ones, and they're not easy, but it can be done, cemeteries. If you pass away and you're a resident of Newberry and you have no plans, your plot is free. That would go away. I believe our cemetery plots now are $350 for residents. That would go away. You would be paying the full share of the plots, the maintenance, and everything. We have shared some services with other communities and with the county. That helps, but we would have to make some fire and rescue. How do you pay for a fire truck? Bill somebody for a fire truck to respond to your house. What would that bill be? The truck was $893,000 that we just purchased. It only goes to 10 fires a year, maybe 15 with mutual aids. That's a heck of a bill there. The squads, again, going to be very expensive if you need a squad to come to your house. Like, they'll have credit card machines, and you'll have to pay as we pull in, because we're going to need to get that money. And the insurance companies, I don't see them forking over the total bill. They may, and raise your rates.
Thank you. Ms. Blankenship, a member of the audience is asking, we were told that if we voted for casinos, the lottery, marijuana, that those would fund schools. Why are we still paying so much percentage-wise for schools? Where are those revenues for the listed things that I said? Where are those going?
It is my understanding, and Mr. Walder might be able to answer this better, but it's my understanding that, especially with the casinos, they said the money is going to the schools, but then the state turned around and deducted that amount from what they were funding the schools. I don't know. I'm assuming that probably is the same thing that's happened with the marijuana. I don't know for sure, but that's my understanding with the casinos. If anybody else has any other ideas, let me know.
Commissioner Brakey, simple question. What are the pros to this whole concept of abolishing property taxes? Simple amendment,
Did you
simple
start
question.
that timer? Come on, give me a second to think. Okay. The pros, I think it would burn the place to the ground, and we would have to really evaluate what we need, what is an essential service and what is not. I think we'd have to make a lot of hard decisions that the public otherwise would not have an appetite for. I mean, I brought up that the cooperative agreement between Lake Health District and Geauga Health District, and I had so many trustees screaming at me and the other board members at that meeting. That was about a health district where people have very little interaction with. What do you think the interaction is going to be when you're talking about a fire district or a police district, even if there are significant savings? Those are things that I think the public has a very emotional reaction to. So to the extent property taxes are eliminated, there's a lot of tough decisions that would have to be made that perhaps the public would be more understanding of. How did I do? Was that all right?
Succinct. Mr. Trofe, do you feel the same way as Mrs. Blankenship about schools merging as Newberry merged with West Geauga?
That was a tough battle. And there were a lot of upset people, still are to this day. We lost our identity. We're no longer the Geauga Knights. We are now the West Geauga Wolverines. Not a totally bad thing. I'm not knocking West Geauga. I graduated from there. But it's to merge. That's. I know what we went through with the schools. I couldn't imagine what we would have to go through with an entire township. That would be brutal.
Thank you. Ms. Blankenship, decades ago, the Ohio Supreme Court ruled using property taxes was an unconstitutional way to fund schools. How would the school funding issue be resolved, or what are some options that are being considered?
Well, one thing that took place probably 5-6 years ago, maybe longer, is the Fair School Funding initiative that happened in Columbus. And actually, Dr. Hanlon was part of it. It was brought about to help funding of the schools. I know that this past biennium, they decided not to fund continue the funding of the Fair Schools Fair Schools Funding Act. But I think going forward, what's interesting is back when the DeRoff case took place, if you look at the percentage of what the state was funding schools compared to what they're funding now, it's a lot less. So even when it was made unconstitutional, the state still has not stepped up to fund the schools.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Trofe, landlords passed on increased property taxes to renters. Landlords pass on increased property taxes to renters, so they do pay for increases in property taxes. Is this not true?
I haven't spoke to a landlord direct, but I would think he would still want to keep property taxes down in order to he could raise the rent. The renter's going to pay whatever the rent is. If the property tax is less, that's better for the owner of the property. So I still feel that the owners of the rental houses, again, who usually do not live in the community, are making out and have a little edge on it. If they can keep that property tax lower, it's not going to stop them from raising rent. Mm-hmm. They're still going to raise the rent.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Okay, I do have some questions that were submitted for the auditor and the prosecutor, so I can pose those from here, and then I would invite you to come up and answer those. So we'll do that. Mr. Walter, we'll start with you. Are homeowners, businesses, apartment buildings taxed at the same rate for property taxes?
That's a great question. The answer is if it's used for commercial purposes, it's taxed at a commercial rate. Typically, rule of thumb in Geauga is the commercial rate is roughly twice that of a residential rate. The argument has been, is that a fair rate? Typically, people, I have to have full disclosure here. My wife and I have owned a real estate company for 30 years, so I have rented property. I will tell you this, in all honesty, we have never lowered our rents if the taxes went down. So I don't want to disappoint any potential renters, but typically you do an annual analysis of your cost model and you build in a reasonable return rate on your investment to the property. And there are a number of factors, to Greg's point, that go into what determines rent. Tax is one of them. There are probably 50 other components, including if you've mortgaged the property in which you're renting, which you have to have a carrying cost. So anybody who's taken Econ 101 knows, the market for renting is supply and demand based. It's not a math model. It's based on what the market will bear. My wife and I have had to reduce our rents in order to stay competitive and actually break even or lose a little money rather than have the property sit dormant and empty. So there's a lot of dynamics to that. But the short answer to the question, because that's what you asked for, is typically a rental property is considered commercial, and in that capacity, it would pay a commercial rate.
Don't sit down. I got a lot for you here. How does our funding situation and approach compare to neighboring counties and maybe other states?
Oh, boy. Well, let's talk about first other counties. Geauga is unique. I don't know that anybody here would disagree with that. We are one of the wealthiest counties, one of the healthiest counties. We are a very fortunate county. We have very giving people. There are counties that are destitute. They have counties that are hurting very, very much for every dollar they can scrape, and a lot of residents don't want to pay taxes in other counties. So our dynamics and our statistics are unique. I don't use comparatives. I just run math. That's what my job is as auditor. Now, how it's compared to other states, I think there's a good argument there. I happen to own a property in another state. We have roughly 40% higher property values in that other state. and we pay roughly half the tax that we pay here. However, I pay almost 10% sales tax on everything I buy. So, and if I were to license a car in the state that we have a property in, we pay a percentage of the value of the car. So there, you can't just take one component and do a cost analysis because you'll cherry pick all of the best ones for you. And we all, I think, realize that. So I think you have to look at this, as Commissioner Brakey said, in a holistic fashion. The entire market that we're in, the entire tax market, needs to be reevaluated, and we need to do strategic, surgical change to the system. I don't think we need to axe it to death. I think we need to use a scalpel.
Okay, this is concerning senior homeowners, which I know is a hot topic. Is there any possibility being discussed to offer every senior homeowner a reduction? Would the state replace lost funds?
I'll answer the last part of that question first. The state has no appetite to help us. I'm sorry to say that. A lot of people have asked for those exact things. I think there are two components that we are not doing what we think we're not doing the right thing for people, and that is our seniors and our veterans. By far, those two segments are being disenfranchised. Having said that, every initiative that seems to go to Columbus gets echoed back that that's a great idea, take it out of the local governments, which just adds to everybody's tax base. I don't think that's the right solution. I think the system is generally broken when it comes to how we value houses, how we escalate those values on a periodic basis, and I think we have to have a scaled system. Right now, everything's treated the same. Properties are all evaluated together. I think that is the wrong approach to this, but I don't write the legislative laws, I follow them, so you kind of get what you have. But state legislatures have been very clear to me that Columbus has no appetite to fix this problem for us. It's a local problem.
Thank you. Proponents of abolished property taxes often cite people losing their homes because they are unable to pay their taxes. How many times has this actually happened in Geauga in the last 5 years?
Well, I actually like this question because I don't foreclose on homes. That would be the treasurer and the prosecutor. So I'm going to let Jim answer that question.
I do not have those numbers in front of me. Purely tax foreclosures, the amount of foreclosures that are filed in the county, a very small percentage of those are tax foreclosures. So we're actually initiating the foreclosure because the taxes are in arrears. There are a lot of protections in the law for folks who are behind on their taxes. They get payment plans, and the treasurer probably has a better handle on those numbers than me. So I'm going to turn it over to him. But it is of the overall foreclosures, it is a very, very small percentage in our county. But it has happened. I'm not going to say that it does not happen.
I tried my very best to stay in the back and stay quiet. Foreclosures is a very serious business. You have to really screw up for Jim to foreclose and for the sheriff to take you out. I tell friends, you have 3 years of no tax. After that, you're going to move. It's that simple. But we also have times where a taxpayer will call me and say, I want to stay in my home, but my kids, my adult children, say I have to leave. They haven't paid taxes for a few years, so the kids ask me to foreclose so mom and dad can finally move out of their home to somewhere where they need to be cared for. That's a horrible story, but it's not a story, it's a fact. When a family comes and says, we have no recourse, mom will not leave. My mother's not going to leave. She had to get ill, and then we took her in an ambulance. She never went home again. Foreclosing is serious business, but everybody gets 3 years. Now, we do have a few commercial scofflaws. There was one fella in Auburn. He didn't pay real estate tax on his properties, plural, commercial for 3 years. He foreclosed on him, but he didn't pay a dime in 3 years. And what that means, everybody else, they had to cover for him. That's bologna and peas. And that's very nicely said.
Okay. Thank you for visiting with us. Mr. Flays, I'm going to bring you back up here. Does the amendment, if passed, take effect immediately, or is there a time frame before collection takes shape, I'm guessing? Place.
Yes.
It doesn't say that, but.
So this is an interesting debate that Chuck and I have been having. So taxes are collected in arrears. So there's one thought that, well, hey, we're going to get a whole year of property taxes if this passes. The way I read the amendment language, I don't agree with that. It says no property taxes will be levied or collected. At that point, I would feel, in my opinion, I think it would be immediate. Now, there would be a slew of lawsuits, okay? Again, the schools there's constitutionally guaranteed education for students in the state. Now, the legislature's ignored that, been held in contempt, been called out by the courts many times, and they've done nothing. So I don't anticipate that would change, but you'd have lawsuits on that front. You'd have lawsuits with all the different contracts, bonds. This building was paid for with a loan, and that loan is tied to our taxes. And you can bet that those folks are going to expect to be paid for their loan. And so there is some case law with the U.S. Supreme Court that if you've made a contractual obligation as a government, you can't eliminate the source of the income and duck those contractual obligations. So there would be some issues there, but you'd see a slew of lawsuits. But I do believe my interpretation of the language is it would take effect immediately. We would not have that year of collection.
Okay, I have another one for you. Yes, for you. This is your lucky day. So you talked about this a little bit in your intro when you discussed grassroots petition gathering versus paid collectors, but could you just be clear, who is responsible for collecting signatures for this ballot initiative?
There is a group that formed that, what is it? I'm not. Yeah, there's a property tax coalition. It's a group, a gentleman out of Lake County that Brian Massey, that I believe is leading the effort. But it is a grassroots effort, is my understanding. And so those folks, and anybody can go, pretty much anybody can go and circulate petitions within each county to reach those signature requirements. And so that group has hooked up with other folks around the state, and they are collecting those signatures. So if you've been asked to sign that petition, and that's a group, a citizens group that is doing that. As far as I know, they haven't. I don't think there's a PAC yet. I don't think they've formed any type of organization like that. It seems to be more of just petition gathering at this point from like a affiliated group of folks. Again, it started in Lake County.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to the panelists for a moment. Chris Carroll, could you come up? There's a question for you. So while you're coming up, I'll go to the panelists first, and then I'll direct a question to you. So Commissioner Brakey, has anyone studied or evaluated how many people will lose jobs if and when services are cut? Won't this increase unemployment and possibly crime?
Yes. So we're starting to look at that. So that's one thing we're looking at with the property tax abolishment response task force. How did I do? Good. Okay. Is that who could we get rid? I mean, I don't want to say that. That sounds terrible. Whose job can we abolish? Who could we lay off legally? Either that there's no contractual obligation or there is not a statutory requirement for the services that those folks provide. So I think it would be massive job abolishments for any folks that are providing services that aren't statutory.
Thank you.
But I don't have a specific number.
Okay. Okay, this question is going to go to Chris Carroll, who's the head of the Geauga County Library. What effect would abolishing property taxes have on parks and libraries? So you could comment to libraries, unless you know about parks.
So I can just speak to the libraries. 2/3 of our funding comes from property taxes, so that would be the impact. We would have to assess what we're doing. We would have to cut our services by 2/3, and that would include staff and possibly buildings.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. I have a few more questions. Mr. Walter. Of the ballot issues passed in 2024 and 2025, what percentage were renewals versus additional?
Yeah, I had that in my last, so at the first meeting, I actually broke it down that way. I was asked to shorten it, so I got rid of that. But I have that data. There were more renewals than there were new money. That's normal in any cycle of ballot. But I would venture to say, I believe there were 2 or 3 with either renewal and an increase. That's kind of new money, only a percentage of it. There were maybe 1 or 2 that were actually additional levies. So there were a handful. So if you do that math, you can figure it out. If not, I have that data from the first session. I'm happy to provide that to whoever asked that question. You can ask Pam McMahon from my office. She'll get it to you.
Okay, I have one more for you. With the $250 million currently collected, where would that money come from? Does that say 250 or 150? 250. Yeah, it's 250. Okay.
I have the same problem with that number. It's 248, not to split hairs. So, I guess that's the question. I guess here's the question. I'll turn it back around. And everyone knows this answer because you've been paying attention this whole night. How much of that $250 million goes to Columbus? None. Not a nickel. It all stays here. As a matter of fact, 10% of that $250 million comes from Columbus in the form of rollback. So here's what I said at the first meeting that I truly believe. We've all said that the legislature has let us down for years. And I'm not blaming necessarily the current. They've done more in the last year than they've done in the last 30 years. But aside from that, we are virtually giving the people in Columbus who haven't done their jobs a 10% pay raise. And that we're doing that on our backs. I have a problem with that personally, but that's not to say there's not huge merit with this initiative, because we need to change government. We need to change how government is done. And sometimes that takes a branding iron to make that happen. And I think we all see at the Budget Commission, we have been the pointy end of the spear for many, many years because we've taken a hard line with people. Now the state's decided that's the way they want to do it after we've taken the hit for 8 years. That's fine, but I think it's no different with property taxes in general. I personally believe the component they should be focusing on is the unvoted component. Taking away the right of people to vote on a tax, to me, is not right. And that's 30% of your tax. I mean, if you got a 30% tax increase, would you be happy? I would be, but I don't know that that's what they're offering. Am I done?
You're done. You can have a seat. Mr. Flays, assuming that the constitutional amendment does pass, would it be the responsibility of the state legislature to come up with a solution to the now missing revenue? So I think we sort of know the answer to this, but I'd like you to clearly state.
No, the answer is no. I mean, there is that constitutional provision about educating children. Children are guaranteed an education under the Constitution, but they've ignored that provision many times. So there is the state would not be required to provide a solution. I would hope that they would be forced to at least give us the tools. But again, I think the answer would be providing tools to local governments to raise revenues another way, either through sales taxes, income taxes. Just quickly, somebody talked about safety and with Commissioner Brakey's question, and it made me think. So the sheriff's office is roughly 45%, maybe a little less, of our cases countywide are through the sheriff's office, which means about 55% plus of our criminal cases come from all those other police departments. All those other police departments are 80 to 90% funded through property taxes. They would be gone. There's no Bainbridge, Chester, South Russell, Middlefield, Chardon police departments. They would absolutely be gone. The township police departments could not survive this. And so either you would, double the sheriff's office patrols and their staff to make up for the loss of those departments, or you would see a corresponding drop in cases. So I don't think crime would go down, but we certainly would be catching a lot less of it because our law enforcement resources would be reduced over 50% in the county.
Thank you. I'd like to invite Mr. Hitchcock back up. So it's sort of, it's asking the same question in a different way. So an audience member just really wants to know approximately how many home foreclosures there have been in the last 5 years. For property taxes, for tax purposes.
I can't tell you right now. I could in consultation with Jim's office, but we also have individuals that are going to lose their home because they are late. No, you can be late. It's a wonderful thing, the way government terms being late. They say, oh, you're delinquent. And some people in our county, they're not delinquent. We are currently at a 98% tax collection rate. That's what we use for our estimates when we work with all the townships and the school districts. But our actual collection rate is 102%. That goes to the wealth of our county and the willingness of our taxpayers to pay their tax bills. I will find out how many we have in the past 5 years, but I would guess that would include COVID. I'm going to say maybe 30 or 40 in a county that has 55,000 parcels. That is materially insignificant. So don't worry about being thrown out of your house. Unless you're one of those that isn't going to pay for 3 years, then you're going to move. Okay?
Thank you. Okay, that concludes all of the audience questions that we have had submitted tonight. We've ended in record time. How efficient was our panel? Thank you to everyone. If your question was not asked this evening, you're able to speak with our elected officials in the room here up until 8 o'clock and have a good night. Carol, did you want to say anything else? I do want to say that we do have a third session coming up on April 7th, and that is in Middlefield. So if you know somebody who wasn't able to make it tonight or watch the live stream, it is at 7 p.m. on April 7th, and we have a candidate forum on April 9th. Thank you and have a great night.
Chris, I'm a friend of Carol Mansfield.
Oh, good.
And that last person was Mrs. Chardon.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's components for getting making property tax. And there's lots of seniors losing their homes. That's why I need that number. That's why I need the number. The number is
Build a building and nobody
Jim's already started.
No, I think it's the building.
I think 30, 40 is a good number.
I mean, and honestly, but
I'm afraid you guys own the equipment. That will get me to respond. I respond instantly. Very lucky. Well, I've known her for 20 years.
I just, I wanted to, again,